Jung's point later in answer to Job is that the perfect example of that is the annunciation of Mary bodily into heaven, so that she becomes bodily in the chamber with God and Christ and the Holy Ghost. And and that doesn't happen until 1950. Okay, and so Jung is talking about that later on at paragraph 752, where he's talking about that being the most important theological event since the Reformation, which was when Pius XII made her, put her in heaven. How did he put it here? In 752 he says, "It is chiefly my experience in the latter field which have given me the courage to enter into the discussion of the religious question, and especially into the pros and cons of the dogma of the Assumption, which, by the way, I consider to be the most important religious event since the Reformation. It is a petroscandale for the unpsychological mind. How can such an unfounded assertion as the bodily reception of the Virgin into heaven be put forward as worthy of belief? But the method which the Pope uses in order to demonstrate the truth of the dogma makes sense to the psychological mind, because it bases itself firstly on the necessary prefigurations, and secondly on the tradition of religious assertions reaching back for more than 1,000 years." So,
what does he mean by the necessary prefiguration?
well, he means that the Pope set a foundation. He made his case. Okay, yeah, and I've given you that, and it's in the Dropbox also. The assumption of the Virgin Mary into heaven, but and you can also find it on Google. Just Google the Assumption of the Virgin Mary into heaven, Pope Pius XII, and you can have the full text of it and read it for yourself. Pardon? Yeah,
but I don't know what he means by prefiguration. He's talking about
well,
some
precedent,
concept of her divinity.
He's talking about the religious case for her going into heaven. Now, part of that has to do with the faithful, which is, for like 400 years or more, there were Catholics running around saying, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the God is with thee, and with the fruit of thy womb, Jesus," or whatever the rosary is. Right? I'm not.
But she was considered to be mortal by the church officially. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, the church was losing its people, I think, because the people had decided that the Virgin Mary was part of the Godhead, and they were all praying to her. And so, if she's a divinity, and everybody in the church is praying to her and carrying a rosary around, geez, I think we better assume her. She better be assumed, type thing, right? Right. Okay. So, okay, but all right, but that we're jumping ahead 100 paragraphs to get to that, yes. Though. So.
But I remember when I went into Catholic church as a teenager with one of my little friends, and seeing the Virgin Mary there, I was wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, she was actually bigger than almost. She was just, in terms of priority, just below Jesus, I believe. Mm-hmm. In the feel that you got from it, but
that was just one of the Marys, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she wasn't really talked about a whole lot. Their statues were all over the place.
Yeah. Right.
Which is very interesting.
Right.
Aren't the novenas? Are the novenas to Mary?
Yeah, and all the prayers and everything.
And I have to tell you that my mother used to read books to me and stories all the time to me and my brother and sister, And one of the ones that we loved was the Juggler of Notre Dame. Okay,
Wait, Juggler?
the Juggler of Notre
Okay.
Dame. Okay, so the Juggler of Notre Dame, the basic story is that the Juggler of Notre Dame has no money to donate to the church. And I mean, it's still numinous to me, so excuse me, but okay, so the Juggler of Notre Dame has nothing to give to the church. And so he goes into Notre Dame and he spreads his cloth out on the stone floor and kneels down in front of the statue of the Virgin and juggles for her to show his talent. And she comes down, Pygmalion style. She comes down from her pedestal and comes over and wipes his brow while he's sweating from doing the juggling, and then goes back up. He had that vision, and I mean, it still is quite a numinous story to me, and I probably heard it when I was 8 years old or 7, something like that.
Like the little drummer boy.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's just amazing. But I mean, that's what makes me know that the psychological impact of these things is significant, and how it is, it is heaven, or, she is divine. Certainly that story is a divine story, because if, I'm not a very emotional guy. I'm a semi-typical guy, retired Marine, but if I just tell you that story, it brings tears to my eyes, right? And so that's how you know it's a religious experience, and just relating the story as a religious experience. So anyway, from the Catholic standpoint, we're back to 655 now. From the Catholic standpoint, through the Holy Ghost, the dogma can progressively develop and unfold. And so what Jung's accolade was that from the matrix, I think he literally says, from the matrix of the church, the Virgin Mary was allowed to be assumed, or enunciated. I guess it's called the Annunciation, isn't it? It's
Yes.
okay. And so,
Curious it took so long, though, doesn't it?
pardon?
It's curious that it took so long.
Well, I mean, this is a patriarchal religion, and
At least it was once they canonized it.
yeah. So anyway, Christ tells his disciples that they are gods and they can do much more. God will send his counselor, the Holy Ghost, who will abide with them and teach the believers all things, guide them into the truth, a continuing realization in his children. So Christ was explicitly saying that you are gods, okay? And yet, that was completely opaque to me for my whole lifetime, practically. And, the idea that I know, speaking for myself, having come up in Protestantism, I always thought when I was saying, Our Father who art in heaven, I was praying to somebody up there, okay? And yet, when I read Answer to Job, I suddenly had this epiphany. Of course, it's psychic facts. It's not physical facts. It's psychic facts. And, it's obvious that the Juggler of Notre Dame story is a numinous psychic fact to me. You should look it up on the internet and read the story to let it be numinous to you, but it's obvious that it is to me. And so anyway, Christ knew what he was doing. He knew what he was saying. He knew what he was saying, and he knew he was saying that God was going to be incarnated in all his followers.